Good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting for Bedford Township for May 1st, 2018. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call up Father Don with Mount Carmel Church to open us up in prayer. Thank you. I believe that green light's on the mic, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Good evening. Let us place ourselves in the presence of God and bow our heads in prayer. We stand before you, Holy Spirit, conscious of our sinfulness, but aware that we gather in your name. Come to us, remain with us, and enlighten our hearts. Give us light and strength to know your will, to make it our own, and to live it in our lives. Guide us by your wisdom, support us by your power, for you are God, sharing the glory of Father and Son. You desire justice for all. Enable us to uphold the rights of others. Do not allow us to be misled by ignorance or corrupted by fear or favor. Unite us to yourself in the bond of love and keep us faithful to all that is true. As we gather in your name, may we temper justice with love so that all our discussions and decisions may be pleasing to you and earn the reward promised to good and faithful servants. We ask this of you who live and reign with the Father and the Son, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much for being here. Okay. Number 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Approval of the agenda is submitted.
Support. Okay, motion is supported by Mr. Fredericks. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Okay, item 3 is the consent agenda, the agenda committee reports. A, the committee recommends to the full board to approve and place on file the minutes of the April 17, 2018 regular meeting of the Bedford Township Board. I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Support.
Motion is supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 4 is presentations. A, an update from Deputy Drain Commissioner Tim Sergo, Monroe County Drain Commissioner of the Toledo Water Authority Project. Tim, thank you very much for being here. Give us an update.
Well, the regional water has been ongoing for about 2 years now, and it's taken a little bit of a turn. TAWA, which was thought to be the conceptual with a memorandum of understanding that was signed by all the communities in the city of Toledo, has learned that the city of Toledo cannot get that through city council. They don't have the votes to put that on the ballot. So the mayor has proposed a little different variation of that, and it's being called the RWB, Regional Water Board. And what it involves is a group of engineers that will sit as advisory and make recommendations to the city council about running the water plant, in essence, in a simpler form. The first meeting of the RWB is on Friday of this week, tentative. And in the next 4 months, they want to propose a governance model and a system to which to implement that RWB and present that to city council through the mayor, and he's trying to get that to be approved by city council and be put on the November ballot for the city of Toledo voters to decide whether they want regional water or not. So at this point, we're just kind of working through all the different scenarios. Some days we take 2 steps forward and some days we take 2 steps backwards, but we have been working pretty diligently, your drain commissioner has, to work through to get a regional water system. The 3 fundamental goals are a meaningful
Tim, can you come a
governance
little
voice.
closer to your mic? Can you
Pardon me?
come a little closer to your mic? Or
Yeah,
lift it up?
the three fundamental goals of the regional water would be a meaningful governing voice for all the members, including the suburbs and the city of Toledo, redundancy, and that could be in many different forms. It could be second intake, it could be attaching to Cleveland Water, Great Lakes Water Authority. There's a couple different things that could happen so that we would not lose water if we had a catastrophic failure like we had a few years back and lost water for 3 days from the city of Toledo water plant. And the third item is we want a long-term valued cost to the water. So what's going to provide us, perpetual water at the best cost long-term. Those are the three guiding lights that that the drain commissioners used and all the other members of the regional water board so far. And we're moving forward on that. And it's been a slow process. Of course, you have all the mayors and the drain commissioners sitting at the meetings, and then, of course, you have to deal with all the different councils that are associated with those mayors. So that's kind of where we're at today. I wish I could report a whole lot more, but I really can't.
Can you talk a little bit about the studies that's being done currently?
Yeah, first of all, the Monroe County plans on honoring their contract with the city of Toledo. But long-term, you have to look at all the different scenarios and options and determine, what's in the best long-term interest of everybody. We currently are looking at Great Lakes Water Authority and what their rate structure would be and what that would be to bring water in. And those are just options that the Regional Water Board is going to look at also.
Okay, any questions from board members, Ms. Denneberry?
What's that, what's Great Lakes Water Authority?
That's the old Detroit Water.
Oh.
When they went in bankruptcy, they came out as GWLA. Yeah, our number one focus is to stay with the city of Toledo and work through the regional water scenario. That it would be our best long-term solution. Infrastructure is all piped that way. It would provide the best long-term solution if we can make all that happen.
Okay,
Reminder, we have 13 years left on our water contract,
okay, Mr. Fredericks?
and we plan on honoring that.
Mr. President?
Almost every week, and sometimes shorter, there's a new development that's printed in the Toledo Blade. The last one was that Mayor Kapsakewicz said, wait a minute, Toledo is going to maintain control, custody, and ownership of the Collins Park water treatment system. That's been a fan of ex-Mayor Curry Finkbeiner and a couple other people who have been on television discussing that at length. The other issue going forward is valuation of that plant. Carty thinks it's worth $1 billion, $1.2 billion, $1.5 billion, depends on what day of the week you talk to him. Our interest locally, even though the drain commissioner is at the county level, and so this is a county project. If we look at South County Water, the citizens of Bedford Township are the major users of the water that comes through South County Water. And so I've been harping a little bit about having the drain commissioner come here, and thank you for coming, Tim, to tell us what's going on. If we're going to have to see substantial rate increases for water because of whatever the plans are, we should know those ahead of time. Maybe we won't know the exact cost, but if you're talking about a new intake, 20 years ago it was $40 million. I'll multiply that times 2 now. And that was to go out 8 miles into the lake and up just to stay out of the shallow water areas because it was too warm to treat in the summer. Black & Veatch, an engineering firm, had a significant study 15, 18 years ago. I'm hoping that whoever the powers that be have at least pull that out of the archives and keep it at least in the front, so there's some idea of work that's already been done. We don't want to spend time rehashing an old project. So in any event, from time to time, Tim, it would be appropriate, I guess, although it's like hitting the Pillsbury doughboy with the changes from time to time. Come down and just give us a little talk so the citizens of Bedford have an understanding. They don't want to hear it from me. They want to hear it from you. They want to hear it from the Drain Commissioner. They're the ones, the Drain Commissioners, in fact, is the fellow who's representing the entire county on this project. So again, from time to time, Mr. Supervisor, it would be appropriate, I think, to invite either Mr. Thompson or Mr. Sergo to come and just give us an update, rather than, we start writing stuff on the wall that we learned from the Toledo Blade. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, any more, Mr. Steiner?
Tim, the real difference between TAWA and a regional water board. TAWA says, okay, city council won't go with it. What's going to be different with a regional water board that maybe council will go with it? I mean, what is the big change or difference that it's going to make any difference?
Well, I think that to the angst of Cardi Finkbinder and a lot of the citizens of the Toledo, they didn't want the sale of their water plant. A meaningful governing voice doesn't mean we have to own the water plant. It just means that we want it run properly and we want a fair price for the water. And we doesn't mean we have to own it. We don't even have to run it. We don't even have to have a say in running it, as long as it's run properly and there's a review of that and the financials are in order and that we're being properly charged for the water. And that's the fundamentals of of what we're trying to achieve. We negotiated in good faith for well over a year with the previous mayor, and then she lost, and then she said she was against it right from so she kind of lied to all of us, because I sat in those meetings, and now we're dealing with the new mayor, and he has a council to deal with, and so we truly want regional water to work, and it can come in many different forms, and as a group, we're working through that. We're still all at the table. And it is the best viable option for South County Water and the Bedford residents, of which the Drain Commission is concerned about all the ratepayers.
Well, I don't know yet how I feel about whether we would want ownership or non-ownership, but the one thing, granted, said there'd be a voice at the table. But one of the biggest concerns that I have, no matter what they do, is how much is our voice going to mean if we don't have some kind of, I hate to use the word strong arm here, or the communities around have, because if they neglect the system again, which it's been neglected for years, there's no secret about that. What can we do to prevent them from allowing, if we don't have a good, strong voice?
Well, that's what the mayor is trying to set up with a charter change, I think. I think they're looking at setting it up properly, that they have to do this or this, and if they don't pick this, they have to do this. They can't just sit on their hands and decide not to put any money in the water plant for 40 years, where literally the roof was falling in, and then of course now there's $500 million worth of improvements because of that. On the flip side, we enjoyed extremely low water rates for those years because they didn't put any money in the infrastructure, and now we're being hit with it all at once.
I would just hope that they're
Right.
really equalized, because if you look at what Toledo City pays versus what the suburbs pay, it's not even comparable.
Well, even when they get the deal, I think it's, 9 years before they'll even out?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so part of it has to do, that has always been part of the negotiations, that we will equalize water rates. But it won't happen overnight. It'll happen over a many-year transition, and 8 or 9 years is a projection.
Okay.
Mr. Francis?
I guess from my perspective, it seems like this is going the same way that Detroit did. It's all about power, and they don't want to give it up. Detroit was forced to give it up by the bankruptcy judge, and they set up a regional plan that's working. We've got the same, you've got the same consultant that Detroit used. They're not listening apparently, because they still want to keep it. And if all of the surrounding customers, all the communities around, bail out and build their own, Toledo's broke. Toledo's bankrupt as soon as that happens, because they can't afford to pay it. by themselves.
Yeah. They'll experience very high rates.
Yeah.
If
And
they
that's
lose the
just,
suburbs. We are in a very good position to where our contract still has 13 years. A lot of the contracts are coming up in the 4 to 8 year window. There's a lot of them that all have to make decisions on, and the city of Toledo knows that, and they truly are. I think Wade Kapsakevich truly is sitting at the table and trying to work a deal that's good for everybody.
That was the feeling I got the other night
Yes.
listening to him speak, is he's totally for the regional. Any more questions to Tim? On a quick other note, can you explain to the public what they need to do? I see on Facebook and we get phone calls quite often about the water issues. What could be some of the problems people are having, whether it be leaks, the rates, how it's going. Can you just kind of touch on that a little bit before you go?
Well, just briefly, just remember people to conserve water when you can, and if you have a drippy faucet or a running toilet, you have to get it fixed because it will run the bill up significantly. You don't think it does, but it uses thousands of gallons, and you'll be paying a lot of extra money. Remember that lawn sprinkling, also be mindful of how many times a day, and really do you need it, and when it's raining, you should turn your sprinklers off and conserve a little, and let Mother Nature take its course there. That's the things you don't need to do. That's what I'm doing. When I hear the runny toilet, I go and fix it right away. I don't wait a month. It'll run the bill up $30, $40. We went to monthly billing in the last couple of months, and we did that so that it would be a more easy transition for people to pay that bill monthly. It was the right thing to do. The water bills had gotten extremely high, a lot higher than the sewer bills. And as a result, we went to monthly billing, and that transition is working really well. We have a lot of people signing up all the time for automatic withdrawal, which is a lot easier on the bookkeeping side and collecting of the funds. That's been a win-win so far.
All right. If no questions for Tim, I appreciate the update, and if you guys have something significant that pops up that you need to update us on, let me know. Otherwise,
Yeah, I
we'll
think
just.
we're probably going to know more come mid-late fall,
Okay.
what's going to happen or not happen with regional water.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to number 5, public comment. Comments limited to 2 minutes for board agenda items only. So come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale. This is in regards to Section 8F. It doesn't matter if Clarence Darrow writes the contract. Contracts are not perfect. You can't write trust into a contract, no matter how hard you try. It's something that has to start right from the beginning as the foundation of any contract or agreement. There's no human document that's perfect. We see laws all the time that are passed in the government where people find loopholes in them. The only document I know that's perfect is the Word of God, and that's because it's inspired by the Holy Spirit. But this document won't be inspired by the Holy Spirit. I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it should be. But the bottom line is this: when we write this contract, there has to also be the lack of appearance of impropriety. I think we know what that means. I know Mr. Goldsmith. I know the type of person he is and stuff. I have no problems with him writing a contract and rewriting it and amending it. I just hope that this board understands that just because we write a contract doesn't mean that it's going to be followed. There has to be a level of trust built up between us and the Sheriff's Department so that when there are any questions about the contract arise, that there are clear and concise answers to those problems or those particular concerns. And I just hope and pray that, that when we're done with this situation, which I don't think is over with yet, but I'm hoping comes to a quick end here, that we get some kind of clarity and some kind of an agreement that the Sheriff's Department needs to provide for us the services that they say they're going to provide, and that there is no question about the hours that they provide for us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, moving on to 8A, request for approval of vouchers for payment. Ms. Hirschberger?
I'd like to make a motion that the following vouchers be approved for payment. General Fund, $74,242.73. Fire District, $20,613.38. Police Fund, $331.03. Park Fund, $5,065.53. Transit System Fund, $18,492. Library Fund, $2,119.34. Water Revenue Fund, $800. Rehabilitation Fund, $30. Downtown Development Authority, $154.20. Sewer O&M Fund, $4,168.03. Trust and Agency Fund, $625.90, for a grand total of $126,642.14.
Second.
Okay, motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8B, request for approval of the Development Design Standards Ordinance Waiver for Montry Estates, PUD. Mr. Fredericks.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. This is a somewhat unique situation that will be remedied by doing some work with respect to the design, or the development design standards. But the issue here is a waiver of the materials to be used for the storm drainage in the Montry Estates PUD. The PUD was approved a couple months ago. The construction plans have been delivered to the various agencies for review. The developer would like to use a product for the storm sewers that is not in our design standards, but has been approved by the drain commissioner. And they approve the variation from our design standards, which required two types of product to be used for storm drainage. The third one that they want to use is not in our standard, therefore we have to have a waiver. Mr. Supervisor, I move the waiver of the design, or the Development Design Standards Ordinance Number 65 regarding drainage pipe materials required by the ordinance, and that the installation of the storm sewers with this waivered product be in accordance with the pipe manufacturer's specification and subject to approval by the Monroe County Drain Commissioner and the Township Engineer, and that the granting of the variation will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area in which the property and the installation is to be found. That's my motion.
Second.
Motion supported by Mr. Francis. Discussion, Mr. Steiner?
Just real quick, this isn't the first time we've done some variations on some drainage. And I see, again, this is from an ordinance of 1991.
Yeah.
Ms. Hirschberger, do you know if through Karen Kay's department planning, if they're looking at getting an update to this particular ordinance?
The answer is yes. I talked to Ms. Kincaid on two occurrences about this. As the products change, we're not moving fast enough in the design standards to catch up. And so she has told me that there will be work in the next few days, few weeks to bring that stuff up to date, put this new product in, high-density polyethylene, PVC, reinforced concrete pipe. It keeps changing because
Right.
new materials come along. And obviously, if we're using more flexible material, we have to have a better site to put it in, and it has to be tested and a number of other things. Yes, she is going to be starting at the Planning Commission to make some changes.
Okay,
It'll
'cause I
be
know the-
general code changes, so it just has to come to the Township Board.
Okay, I just wondered, because I know they've been working on various, ordinances to change. I just wonder if this is one of them.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 7-0. Item 8C, request for approval of the noxious weed mowing bid.
What you have here is the only bid we received, which was from Schlegel Services. They bid $45 per hour, and they were the mowing contract we had last year at the same price, so nothing has changed.
Okay. I look for a motion.
I move that we approve the mowing contract with Schlegel Services on Temperance for $45 per hour.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is supported, Mr. Steiner. I just want to say, this company was very good to work with last year. Ordinance said they were always on time and did the work they needed. They're very fair and honest, so I highly recommend them. Ms. Stenberg?
Can I just ask where this was advertised?
This was both on the website and in the paper.
The Monroe Evening News or the Bedford?
No, it would have been the press.
Okay.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8D, request for approval of the 2008 Ford Crown Victoria bid and the 2000 Ford Ranger pricing. Personally, I don't think, for some reason, people aren't bidding on these. They seem like, I guess they are too high, but I think the Crown Victoria is definitely worth $1,000 in my eyes. But I don't think we're getting it out there good enough with the website and Facebook. I don't know if you guys have any other suggestions of how to advertise these, or whether or not we should, go with a auctioneer, or,
I was going to say, it was in the paper also.
it was in the paper, but,
What's wrong with the bids we got?
well, nobody bid on the $1,000 for the,
No,
for the
nobody-
Crown Victoria, 2008 Crown Victoria.
No, they didn't bid on the Ford Ranger.
Yeah. this
Oh, they
is
did bid on the-
2008.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you got
The
the,
And it's
Ford
more than
Ranger.
1,000.
Oh, okay, all right, I didn't see that one. Okay, the Ford Ranger, then I'm on the wrong one. But yeah, the Ford Ranger, I don't know if you guys want to drop it 1,000, or, I drove the car, it seems like it's in decent shape. It's got low miles. So,
Is the 3,500 a Blue Book number, or?
close.
yeah, I ran that myself, and it's in that range. But again, it's a used vehicle, and, some people look at it, though, as it's more of a business use. I really don't know how it was used, even though it was lightly used here. But I think that's part of the difficulty when you're looking at selling a vehicle like that. Paul?
Okay, Mr.
Paul?
Fredericks? Ms. Tinderberry?
Can we just move on the Crown Vic? I mean, it's more than what you said you thought it was worth.
Yeah,
1,000.
yeah, for sure.
I'd like to move that we sell the 2008 Crown Victoria to Alan Hartman, 3185 Morocco Road, Ida, for $1,206, and as is, where is, or whatever else you need to say about that.
Second.
Motion is supported, Mr. Francis. Discussion? Okay, seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. So do we want to discuss the bid for the Rangers? Do you want to drop it 500 and see what happens?
I'd like to make a suggestion of 29. Gets it under that 3,000 threshold. Sometimes, you get close, and
Okay. I mean, we're in no rush. I mean, we keep starting them. Everything's,
Right.
it's not, people are graduating right now, and it's a good starter car, so
just thought if somebody's got another opinion, go ahead.
I'm fine with that.
Is that a motion?
Do you need that in a motion?
I will if that, unless other, okay, I'll make a motion that we reduce the minimum bid on the 2000 Ford Ranger to $2,900.
Support.
Okay, motion is supported. Discussion? Seeing none, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni.
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 8E, request for approval to amend the wording of the current Monroe County Sheriff's contract. Mr. Goldsmith, you want to touch on that real quick?
Sure. At the meeting of the whole, it was discussed that the township enter into discussions with the county, Mr. Bosonic, the CFO of the county, to amend certain provisions of the contract to provide clarity to the contract in those areas where this board had questions. And so I think it would be a step in the right direction to provide clarity on issues of the contract that were not clearly and concisely understood by the board or members of the board. So that's what we would be doing. I think the general framework of the contract would stay. I don't think anybody is talking about changing the percentages, the 80%, 20%, or the administrative fee. But if this board wants to engage in those types of discussions, they certainly can, those discussions can be held. But I think what the county envisioned was to make the language clearer so that the board clearly understood what services would be provided by the county and under what conditions.
Question.
Mr. Francis?
Mr. Goldsmith, do you feel that the county would be amenable to a multi-year contract? We talked about maybe a 5-year or at least some sort of a multi-year. Would they be receptive to something like that, or?
It's certainly worth discussing. Right now, we have, in essence, a 1-year rolling contract. And that contract is subject to change based upon changes in the collective bargaining agreement for the deputies that are assigned here, what their wage and their fringes are, because those figures are all rolled into that 80-20% split. So if we did that, that would have to be taken into consideration. But from what I hear from the county, they want to continue on that same basis, the 80-20 split, have no intention to change that. But I think it's worth pursuing if the board wants to move in that direction to lock into some of those things. It'll just have to be, I think, set out in the contract that there will be minor changes as we go year to year based upon the collective bargaining agreements that the county, it's a co-employer situation between the sheriff and the county and then the deputies union, and those figures can change on an annual basis or at the time the contract is renegotiated. And oftentimes the contract that's renegotiated, the collective bargaining agreement, builds in annual changes to salary, benefits, things of that nature. So the answer to your question is yes, but I just want the board to understand that language would have to be built in to account for those annual type changes.
I think that's what he's saying. In the end, when we get the contract where we get it tweaked, could we present that
Sure.
with a longer term?
Sure.
That's something we should
No,
look at.
if
So,
we don't ask, we
Yeah, I was
we
mainly
don't know.
interested in trying to lock in the 80-20 split,
Yeah.
because there are others that are higher than that, and some pay 100%. And if they're willing to stick with the 80-20, we certainly are too, or at least in my opinion, we are.
That's the information that I received from the county. So
Great.
I think that discussions can be certainly held along those lines.
Great.
Mr. Fredericks?
Well, I would quibble just a little bit. We have a 90-day rolling contract because they can terminate on 90 days and we can terminate
Sure.
on 90 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we're talking about a longer-term relationship, then the 90-day thing has got to come out of there.
Oh, absolutely. It would be a set number of
Because
years.
right now, we can terminate in 90 days, they can terminate in 90 days. That's part of the provisions. Secondly, the issues that we were talking about is how many hours are we expecting to get? How do they backfill with the people who are assigned How are they assigned? A number of questions that we discussed. But I asked this to be put on the agenda because at our last committee of the whole, you can't make decisions. And so that's why we're here tonight. If it's our intention to go forward, then we have to pass a motion that says, let's start, or let's get that direction, let's start, and that's why it's there.
We need to make sure everybody understands how this is going to move forward, too.
Well, I understand.
How do we want it to move forward? Do we want questions to go to, me, and then I relay them, or do we want to create a board for this? How do you guys want this to work with Masonic to get these questions answered and changed, and what do you guys think?
Well, I think the board needs to select 2 or 3 individuals that will meet with Mr. Basonic and talk about the issues that have been raised in this continuing dialogue, the issues where you want to see changes or amendments made in the contract. That's what I think would work best. So if the board wants to delegate one person to do that, to meet with him, and then report back to the board, because no contract will be approved unless it's approved by the full board in an open meeting. So it could be one person, it could be 2 persons, whatever the pleasure of the board is in that regard.
Well, I don't know if the board is a problem, we could leave it the same 3 people. But however you guys want to do it.
What,
Lamar, Paul, and myself. If you have any different suggestions.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm more than willing to serve.
As am I.
Mr. Steiner?
Couple things. Depending on how the county were to look at suggesting a 5-year contract, if they don't like that option, the other option I was thinking is, Mr. Goldsmith, you may know, do you know what their labor negotiation contract is? Is it a multi-3-year or something like that?
Well, there's more than one bargaining unit, and, yeah, right off the top of my head, I don't know where we're at, which contract comes up next, but you've got the command officers bargaining unit, you've got the deputies bargaining unit, and both of those are applicable because from time, we have command officers down here assigned to Bedford, so we'd have to check that, Mr. Steiner.
I was just wondering, maybe it makes sense, if it fits, to roll it sort of the same time frame. If it's a 3-year, if we can get close to that, maybe 3-year works better than 5-year, but if they get a 5-year agreement on 80/20, that's another option. And I don't want to volunteer that doesn't want to volunteer, but once again, I'd like to see Mr. Clements, if he's available for that committee or group, to meet with the Sheriff's Department, someone that really does understand their language and the ins and outs, and then whoever else decides to be on that group.
And just, I'll point this out because I don't want unreasonable expectations to be raised. One of the things that will be said in the discussions will be that the county board, much the same as this board, is limited in duration of contracts because the theory being you don't want one board, and in the county board's case, they serve 2-year terms, binding future boards with contractual obligations after they may be gone. So that will be raised, and it'll have to be looked at to determine whether or not the county board has the authority to enter into a multi-year contract exceeding their term in office. So that will be a point of discussion that will have to be sorted out and worked through.
We already know that.
Yes.
What's the pleasure of the board? I mean, we can't have more than 3 people. I know Trudy expressed the desire to want to be a part of it as well. I'm going to be a part of it, so.
I'd be willing to bow out.
Ms. Tennevery?
That's what it needs.
So why are you going to be a part of it? I don't understand that. The board can't decide 3 people.
Oh, go ahead, decide. I would like to be a part of it. Go ahead.
Well, you just said you're going to be a part of it, that's why
Well,
I'm
let me
saying.
rephrase it. I'd like to be a part of it because I'm the supervisor.
Okay.
If you would like to be a part of it, Nancy, then that's fine.
Yes, I would like to be a part of it because I think that more needs to be changed than just clarifying understanding. I
Okay.
don't think it's the
Well, then I'd be
wording.
willing to bow for you, Nancy. Go ahead. So Nancy, well, I'm not going to sit here and listen. I said what I thought, the 3 people that kind of finished this thing out, and Mr. Steiner said Mr. Clements. So Ms. Hirschberger wanted to do it too.
Well, I'll make it easy for the board. I would not accept, namely because I think it's still somewhat of a ridiculous notion. We reviewed this contract, and what the grand total came up with is we misunderstand our calculations. And I will tell you, I think it is, well, I won't tell you what I think. I think it is poor form for us to have drug an organization through the last year and a half, and now we are going to somehow take the position that we should go for a 5-year contract because it's beneficial to us, when in fact we know that we have issues with future boards tying the hands of the current board. We know we have severability based on union contracts. I still think this board is dancing in the weeds, but if they want to do it, outside of formal board time, that's totally up to you. But I withdraw my name from that.
Okay, let's move on then. He withdraws his name. I don't understand why the big deal is about understanding the contract and working towards it, but Ms. Tennevery?
I would have to respectfully disagree with Mr. Clements. My position
I do
on this
too.
board is to represent the people, and there are
100%.
a considerable number of people in this community that have asked for a review of the sheriff's contract. It's not about how friendly we are with the sheriff. It's about how we represent the people and what we're doing for their rights and money and whatever. So I actually take offense to the dancing in the weeds.
Yeah, and I could say, if anybody on this board has $1 million contract with somebody, they're going to understand the contract. Guarantee you that.
I would say by now, if you don't understand the contract, I would look at yourself and look at your understanding of the contract, because it's pretty clear. And if you'll look, there aren't any other communities in this county that seem to struggle with the same
Listen,
contract.
we can grandstand, we can talk about this all night. Let's pick 3 people and move forward and get this thing resolved.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Nobody that's spoken in the last few minutes bothered to step up since last July when the committee that we had worked on it for months, was disbanded. It sat idle. Lamar, you and I stepped up to try to at least get something done. Now at the 99th hour, or the 99th percent, somebody steps up, oh, I want to represent the community. Where were you for the last year? It's ridiculous to change the players at the last second. We've read that darn contract a zillion times. If you've got comments that we haven't surfaced, I'm more than willing to entertain them. Maybe you see something we don't, but why start over with a new team?
No, I agree completely.
Ms. Tennevery?
I beg to differ with Mr. Francis. I was not invited to be a part. The supervisor chose Mr. Frederick and Mr. Francis.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't. It was
When
my
did you
idea
give
to
it?
form the thing, so don't blame it on him, blame it on
When did
me.
you give an opportunity for anyone to volunteer?
Everybody had an opportunity when they were disbanded to look at what they've done, go over it. That's what we said at the meeting. Take what they've done, look at the contract, come up with, this was nothing appointed by the board. This was just us
No, it
trying
wasn't
to
appointed
finish
by the
it.
board.
You could have gotten with Mr. Steiner or Ms. Hirschberger and done the same thing. Like I said, I'm fine with whatever the board wants.
Are you open for a motion, Mr. Supervisor?
Yes.
I make a motion that Supervisor Peroni, Trustee Frederick, and Treasurer Francis be appointed to work in conjunction with Township Attorney Phil Goldsmith to reword the current contract with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
We have a motion?
I'll second it for discussion, for sure.
Okay. Motion's for Mr. Fredericks. I know Ms. Hirschberger had a thought.
I was just going to make a motion.
Oh, okay, all right. Mr. Steiner?
Mr. Frederick got it before me, and so I'll go to Mr. Clements. You said rework the contract? I think
Reword?
I think it's clarify, because like you
Okay.
said, the contract is understandable.
I accept that.
Clarify is what I think needs to be done. It doesn't need to be rewritten, reworked. It's clarified, and I think you agree.
Yeah, I
with that.
apologize. I meant reword.
Okay.
If that wasn't clear, but clarify is fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think the clarity is very important.
Absolutely, it's got to be, just got to be clear.
Yep.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. Mr. Fredericks?
Well, again, I brought it up for discussion. In order to negotiate with the county, if we're going to negotiate with the sheriff and/or Mr. Bosonic, you have to be available during the day because he's not going to come down here at night. The second thing is that Mr. Goldsmith brought up the issue of whether a 5-year contract would be binding on a subsequent board, either ours or theirs. That's already been litigated. That's been litigated in a lawsuit of about 10 years ago. In fact, it was a claim that the township brought up, that a deal made by the prior board was not binding on the subsequent board. That does not mean, however, that we can't enter into, I'll use the word, a resolution that says, here's what we intend to do, this is what you intend to do, and we'll put some clarifying language on several of these areas because we did have some concern over whether it's 1,500 hours a month or 1,800 hours a month or 1,600 hours a month or whatever it is. We can at least reach some conclusion. We're concerned about how do we backfill when our people aren't available. In other words, we pay for 10, but not the same 10 are here. How do these mix and match come? And I think we heard from Mr. Bosonic, we heard from Representative the Sheriff. I assign them by whoever's available. Those are the kind of language changes we can make so we understand how they operate, meaning the Sheriff's Department operates, and what we have an expectation for. Those can all be kind of scratched out, brought back here, and discussed. Is that where we want to go? Is that what we want to do? Are those the issues that are important? We don't want to start writing language. I'm going to tell you right now, the worst thing you do is you start writing a contract and then you get arguing over I's and T's and commas and quotation marks.
I don't think that was ever
We don't
discussed
need to
one
get there.
time with
Yeah.
rewriting the contract. Mr. Steiner?
My view is that we need some clarification, and how we get that document in place remains to be seen. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you.
As it says on the agenda, to amend the wording of the contract. So we can't be talking about 3 or 5 year during this period. That's a true negotiation. Wording of the contract, as Mr. Clements' motion has been amended, it is basically the clarification and wording of the contract, not negotiating this contract. It's the wording and clarification.
Is that an amendment?
No, because that's what he stated, and that's what the
Okay.
agenda shows.
Okay.
I'm just saying, so those things can't be put into this right now.
Okay. Could you call the roll or question?
One more question. Do we have a time frame on this? I don't want it to drag months.
I look at Mr. Goldsmith for that.
I think it can be done very quickly. Mr. Bosonic's ready to meet. When this board decides who will meet on behalf of the board, the meeting can be called, discussion held. If there's some general consensus, then it can be brought back to this board for adoption.
Okay. Why don't you shoot him an email and find out a couple dates, and then shoot us an email?
I would, well, we'll see what the board does in terms of who will serve on that committee, but depending on his availability, which we may be able to meet this Friday. So that depends on who's on the committee and what their schedules are.
Now, just for clarity, now, because the board appointed this committee, we have to call for the meetings. Are they open to the public? Do we have to take notes and minutes and agendas because the board appointed the committee? Because that's my understanding with MTA.
Well,
I know we don't have a quorum, because that's the only time technically you have to take all that is if you have a quorum, which is 4 board members or more.
whether or not the board forms a committee is not the determining factor.
Okay?
The determining factor is whether there's deliberation toward a decision and/or a decision made at a committee meeting. And where this issue most often comes up is that a committee is formed, the committee meets, the committee goes through a process, the committee deliberates, the committee brings back a recommendation, and if it's rubber stamped by the full board, then you have violated the Open Meetings Act, okay? If a committee meets and brings back information to the board, and there's full and complete deliberation and discussion at this level, and a decision is made openly in public, then that's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So it can be done either way.
Okay, I just
And
wanted to be
where
clear on that.
I don't know where we're going to meet. I'm guessing that we would meet up at the county seat in Mr. Bosanik's office in the Finance Department. That doesn't mean we can't have a public meeting there. We can post it, and we can have a public meeting. I don't think that's necessary so long as we are not deliberating to a decision, and a decision is made and then
and we're
rubber
not.
stamped. Brings back, anything that happens at that level needs to be brought back with full and complete discussion at this level and a decision made at this level.
Could you handle that if you made a charge to that little committee, that they bring a recommendation back for the wording? Not a decision, a recommendation to be discussed by the whole board?
I would say that the committee should bring back information, and we act on that information. Not necessarily a recommendation, probably not a recommendation, but information such as, this is what the county, through its CFO and perhaps Major Kemp, or the undersheriff, or the chief deputy has suggested. Then the board can look at that and decide, is this acceptable? And then move from there. But the decision needs to be made here, openly, after full and complete discussion. And if we do it that way, we're not violating
No,
the
I
Open
think
Meetings
that's
Act.
the intentions. Mr. Collins?
So would it be possible for the 3 representatives to meet with the sheriff's office, for the sheriff's office to reword, clarify the existing contract, whereby they make the recommendation back to this board? Therefore, the 3 representatives are not making the recommendation, and therefore no discussion, no deliberation, nothing's been had, so therefore it would not have to fall under OMA. My only concern with OMA in this is that you're not making any decisions. Trying to coordinate schedules between everybody is going to be difficult, and to constantly have to post notice, I think that's going to really slow this process down. But at the same time, I don't want to run afoul or have any appearances that something's not above board.
Absolutely. I always err on the side of, if it's close, you have an open meeting, and you post it, and you publish it, so that, you're not, I don't want to even be accused of hiding the light under a bushel barrel or anything like that. So I stand by what I say. Your suggestion is fine, in that the Sheriff's Department probably will come and present, this is what we would agree to. Board, will you agree to that? And this committee, if it's formed tonight, can say, these are the discussions that we had. These are the issues, these are the discussions, this is what's been proposed by the Sheriff's Department and the county in terms of clarifying this contract. If we do it that way, we're not violating the Open Meetings Act, because no decision will be made privately. It'll be made here publicly.
Okay. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Clemens?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Francis?
It's the vote on forming the committee? Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry?
No.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Richburger votes aye. Mr. Peroni?
Aye, the motion passed 6-1. 8F, request for approval to waive conflict of interest of township attorney to draft changes, amendments to the sheriff's contract. Okay. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, Mr. Fredericks.
Well, inasmuch as Mr. Goldsmith's firm represents both the county and Bedford Township, there is an immediate conflict of interest. And they have an ethical consideration to effectively bow out from one or the other. Inasmuch as I believe that our interests, both at the county level and here within the board, are somewhat the same, and I don't believe that Mr. Goldsmith's firm would lead us astray favoring one side or the other, inasmuch as I've worked with him for 20-some years now. Therefore, I would recommend that this board approve a waiver of the conflict of Mr. Goldsmith's firm with respect to assisting the township in its negotiations with the county. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Ms. Tinderberry?
Oh, I didn't know he was making.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm not seconding it.
Okay,
I'll support.
okay, motion supported, discussion, Ms. Tinderberry.
I don't understand how you can waive a conflict of interest. Either there's a conflict of interest or there isn't. This has nothing to do with Mr. Goldsmith. I've known him for 50 years, if that means anything. It has nothing to do with his character or who he is. It has to do with the conflict of interest. And I thought Mr. Bosanic said that they would bring someone else in. They had lots of attorneys. They could bring someone else in. I don't understand where that went.
I didn't hear that, but did he
Said
say
it to
that?
me at home meeting.
The point being that only the client can waive the conflict of interest. He can't waive it. He can't come in here and say, I waive the conflict of interest. This board has to waive the conflict of interest because we are the client of his firm.
I understand that. I don't know how you can waive a conflict. It's either a conflict of interest or it isn't.
Well-
What does waiving it do? What does waiving it, what's the point? Especially if the county, Mr. Bosanic said, that really isn't a problem. We have lots of attorneys. We can select another attorney. I mean, how can Mr. Goldsmith, there's a saying that says you cannot serve two masters, and I believe you cannot serve two masters, and could possibly be the potential of something coming up for discussion that would please the township but not please the county or vice versa. And so,
And I can guarantee you one of these three will speak up at that moment.
why put him in that position? That's my point.
Because we're not rewriting the contract, we're just clarifying it to where we understand. If he makes a suggestion that that is clarity to us, then I think we've done it. Mr. Steiner?
Just real quick, I can't remember, you didn't have a second yet, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay. So if you do have a second, again, I would go with the friendly amendment suggestion. Use the word negotiate. Again, take negotiate out because this is just an amendment to the language because we're not negotiating. And I think that, in my mind, is a little more at ease because if we were literally negotiating the contract, which is dollars and cents, I would say then we probably wouldn't want to waive a conflict of interest saying, hey, Mr. Goldsmith has to negotiate on our behalf or their behalf, period. But in this case, we're clarifying language. We're not negotiating the contract.
Okay. Mr. Fredericks?
Well, the alternative is that we would hire independent counsel to represent us. That's the alternative, and bringing another counsel up to date,
Slow us down.
the institutional memory, bringing this, over a 25-year, I think it's, the Sheriff's Department is about 25 years in representing, would be a substantial cost. We are not writing a contract. What we are doing is trying to get some clarification of our expectation under this contract and what is expected to be delivered, and what do you think you're delivering to us, so that we can get, as has been discussed on numerous times at the podium, one, an understanding of what's supposed to be the deliverables under a contract, and start building some trust between the two parties so that we are comfortable that when we're sending $1 million north to the county for the services that we get, we're comfortable that we are getting value for those $1 million. Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor, and maybe I can help too, and I appreciate what Ms. Tinneberry is saying. With respect to, let me put it this way, I will be representing the interest of Bedford Township only in this clarification exercise, and that's because Mr. Bosanic has expressed his intent to not use any legal counsel with respect to this exercise. If they need an attorney, they'll most likely call upon the law firm that they use in their civil litigation matters through the MMRMA. But even that being the case, I still have a conflict because my firm actively represents both clients, both entities. So it's necessary for this board to waive the conflict if you want me to represent you in this clarification exercise. And only the Mr. Frederick is right, only the client can waive that conflict. If we got to a point in this exercise where, because I'll be representing the interests of Bedford Township, if we reach a disagreement, I'm going to make it very obvious to Mr. Bosanic that we've reached an impasse, and you might want to bring in Randy Field or his law firm to discuss that issue, because I'm not going to ethically breach the confidence that this board has in me or my law firm for something like this, or for anything for that matter. So, and I'm not, you need to do what you feel is right, but I hope that provides some understanding or clarity.
Okay. Ms. Tinneberry?
My question was, Mr. Bosanic stated he would get additional counsel, and now I've heard from Mr. Goldsmith that he doesn't intend to have any counsel. However, I haven't heard that from Mr. Bosanic, and so my question was, has anyone spoken to him about that? And Phil, you're saying you have spoken to him about that?
He mentioned in passing to me that he said, we just want you to represent Bedford. We don't feel as though we need an attorney for this exercise, but if we do, we'll have somebody from Randy Field's firm come in on our behalf. So I will pledge to this board that I will be representing the interests of this board and the citizens of this community in this exercise, and if we reach an impasse, I'm going to tell them, we've reached an impasse, you need to get somebody on your side if you feel the need for an attorney to deal with that.
Which I don't foresee us reaching an impasse. But, Ms. Tinneberry?
So what then is the reason for the waiver of conflict? You're saying that there is a conflict, we're going to waive that, and so in essence, you can plead both sides. You're saying you're not, I'm not distrusting you, I'm just not understanding why then, if you're only going to represent Bedford, we need a waiver.
Because my firm represents both units of government in all other matters. So there is a conflict, and for you to allow me to represent this board would have to waive the conflict so that I can represent the board. That's the reason. It's somewhat of a hyper-technical notion, but because I represent both entities ethically have to be advised of that, and if they want to have independent counsel come in, like Mr. Frederick said, they can do that. If that happened, what I would most likely do, and what I usually do, is I'd step away from it and say, I'm not going to represent either party on this issue.
We have a motion to support. Any more discussion? Hey, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Frederick.
Aye.
Mr. Clement.
Aye.
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Ms. Tinneberry.
Aye.
Mr. Francis.
Aye.
Hirschberger votes aye. Mr. Peroni.
Aye, and the motion passed 7-0. Item 9, comments from the public. Comments limited to 5 minutes for each individual. Come on up.
Good evening, Logan Tisdale. I was fearful to come here on that committee of the whole, I can tell you that. I had visions of people with placards standing out in the lot there, refusing to let me to get in, 50 people making comments at the podium here and stuff. The only thing that people didn't see was the dozen or so deputies in the back there who were giving applause to people. I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you. I thought more people would show up because this has been very heated over the last year, or at least the last months anyway. My concern was, when I heard Mr. Pasonic, there was an agreement, I think, that 18,000 hours was what the contract said that we should be getting for the 10 people that are assigned down here. That's after giving them 35 days. I think we talked about that at the ad hoc committee. Somebody asked who was the experts at that committee. Well, I don't consider myself an expert in law enforcement, but I certainly know a little bit about law enforcement. And after we got the answers to the questions that we gave them, they came back with the names of the people who were here for 2017 as full-time deputies. They gave 14 names. And that was on page 16 of the answers to the questions. And I went through and I looked at every monthly report for those 16 people, or 14 people. And the reason they had 14 was because 4 people that were originally on the contract left for different reasons, whether it was medical or they got different jobs. And I went through and I looked at every person. I looked at the months that they worked, the hours that they worked each month. And I came up with a figure for them. And they said that 7 of the 14 people worked a full year. Only 3 people gave us 1,800 hours, which was their portion of their contract after they gave them the days off. And then I came to the startling revelation that in the end, the people that were here as full-time deputies gave us 15,778.75 hours of service. And that fell short 2,221.25 hours short of the 18,000 hours which Mr. Pasonic said that we should be getting, which is pretty simple. I thought the contract, when it came to hours, it was pretty simple. The 80-20 was about the monetary split, that we would pay 20% of the total cost for that deputy for the year for monetary. It had nothing to do with hours. It had to do with the money part of it. And so that was, I thought it was pretty simple. And all the backfilling you can say, there was nothing that said that they backfilled any of these hours. In fact, the startling part came to me when I started looking at the last page. After August of 2017, there was only 9 deputies that actually logged hours. 9. There was one guy that in December, he logged 8 hours total. After that, we really only had 9 people working the contract here. What happened to the 10th person? Where did they go? These are really important questions I think needs to be answered by the board. That cost us if they never backfill those people, and I don't think they did, it cost us $95,000. Now, they said one of the detectives here logged 1,100 hours. They specifically said that he was a county general fund deputy, which means that he's available to us at any time. If he wants to spend 1,000 hours in Bedford, that's fine, but that shouldn't be on the contract. He's not a contract deputy. He shouldn't be backfilling for anyone. The people that should be backfilling are the ones that take the place of those people that were assigned to that, and nobody was. And the scary part about it was that Mr. Pasonic, I showed him this. I went up to his office and I showed him this. He does not see the hours that are logged by the Sheriff's Department. I mean, we mentioned that one time. I mean, it was obvious to me looking at his quarterly bills that he bills according to the contract, which is absolutely perfect. He did every month, he did every quarter, he did it perfect. $28,000 times 10, he gives you the money, and he goes through a few other things like that, and then he gives us 80% when that's all taken care of, and it was perfect. I mean, he did exactly what he was supposed to do as the chief financial officer for Monroe County. The problem is that the hours that we get here don't coincide with what we pay. And that is, to me, is serious. And that's why I'm so concerned about it. If the Sheriff's Department wants to come down here and do it, that's fine. But give me the 18,000 hours. If you give me 10 people, you should be able to do that. And I don't see the reason why we don't get those hours. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any more comments from the public? Okay, seeing none. Comments from board members? Mr. Fredericks?
My name was omitted from the newspaper that I am running for election to the Township Board. As I indicated when I asked to be appointed to this position. I don't know who gathered the information, but I went to the county and I also checked with the clerk's office. I am a candidate in good standing. I am running for the position, and I will get my name out so that others in the community know that and understand it. I listened intently to the town hall here earlier, and I have some comments that I will make to the supervisor about some issues that were brought up here as they were talking. I don't think I need to make them public. I think we can just talk about them. Number two, number three, I have to disagree with Mr. Tisdale on the calculations. And so we've agreed to disagree, and we'll agree to disagree and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, Mr. Steiner?
I won't tease you tonight, I'm going to be short.
Heard that before.
The weather's turning nice. The weather's turning nice. I'm not a motorcycle rider, but they're out there. So as a driver of a car, I need to be aware, and all of us need to be aware. So motorcycles and bicycles. That I'm now back up to speed on bicycle with Mr. Pryor and a few others. So safety and awareness, so we don't have to call our fire chief and his crew.
Okay. Mr. Clements?
Mr. Supervisor, I don't have anything.
Okay. Ms. Tinneberry?
Pass.
Ms. Hirschberger?
The Buckeye tells us, Buckeye had their first Brainiac session. It was last Thursday. We had 14 people show up. They talked about the internet and how to get better reception in the home. We had 14 people show up. They gave a lot of good information, and we're hoping that the Communications Committee can talk to them about bringing some more sessions to the township. We don't have an election this month. I just want to let everyone know there is no election this month. Our first election will be in August. And if you're interested in working the elections as an election poll worker, then come into our office and fill out the application. We will be doing training classes in June. And then last, we do have mosquito dunks. It is getting warmer, so mosquitoes will be coming out again. You can stop at the Township Hall with your driver's license and pick up 6 of the dunks per house, and they're good for 30 days. And that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Francis?
Well, a couple of things. One, with respect to Mr. Tisdale's comments, it just points out it's a matter of interpretation. You interpret the contract clause called backfill a different way than I do. We're trying to come up with some language so that both sides interpret it the same way, so that we don't have this discussion year after year, month after month. We have to get the language so that both sides agree this is how we interpret that. And I think it's something we need to do. The second item is just to report, last week, I was privileged to attend the Michigan Township Association Annual Education Conference. It was in Traverse City, which is a long drive, but anyway. I was there, I went up Monday afternoon and came back Thursday afternoon, attended 7 sessions on Tuesday and Wednesday on various topics. It was very interesting. I was pleasantly surprised. It was very well attended, a lot of people there. There's still a little snow up in Traverse City. They had 10 or 12 inches of snow the week before the conference. It was, I think, valuable for me to attend, and I got a lot of benefit out of it. That's all I got.
Okay. I, too, attended the MTA conference, and I didn't answer Ms. Tinneberry's question last meeting about whether or not my wife is going. I don't really like to say when my wife and myself will be gone for 4 days in a row and on camera, so I thought I'd say, now, my wife did go with me. It didn't cost the township any extra money. We bought her own meals out of our dime, and anything that she attended, we paid for out of our pocket. So I just wanted to talk about the classes. I did take a social media class, another medical marijuana class, what townships can't do. I mean, I know it, and I took a FOIA class, so it was very good for me. I got a lot out of it. I think even Al sent one of the flyers out today that I received about FOIAs. But it was very good. It's a long drive, but I thought it was well worth the time to do. Just wanted to talk a little bit about, today starts Bike Month. So like Mr. Steiner said, be aware that I'm sure there'll be some bikers out, but May 19th especially, we are working with TMACOG to bring a bike event to Bedford. It is May 19th. There'll be a 50K ride and then a local ride that'll actually start from Jackman Road and go all throughout the neighborhoods. The sheriff's department's got their motorcycles ready for that day. They're going to bring a couple of them out for the family ride. But TMACOG is supplying us with shirts and flyers. These flyers are from them. And then all proceeds from the event will go to either the senior send-off or the girls soccer team for the high school. So they're really excited about that. They're helping out a lot with the day of the event, and we look for this to be an event that goes on every year. Part of my job, I feel like, is getting involved with the community and helping support ideas that people have in events. When I see somebody complaining on social media, I'll call them up and say, hey, I see you complaining about not enough Christmas lights and not enough Christmas themed things going on. Why don't you bring some ideas? And that brings me to the next point with the Blizzard Fest, December 14th and 15th. I'm working with a few ladies on that little committee to hold a festival type deal. Hopeful to have it at Car Park, and working with St. Paul's Church on that. So it's pretty exciting. Then I wanted to talk about the Summerfest a little bit. It'll be held at the Civic Center. Hopefully everything gets passed with the BZA. And that'll be August 10th, 11th, and 12th. The dates have actually changed on that. So that's another thing we're, trying to bring back some of these older community events that we used to have that people miss and talk about all the time. So I think it's important for some of us to kind of work and help out with those things as much as we can, because I think they're important to have in our township. We are still waiting to hear on the TAP grant. Could be in June sometime, so I'm hopeful that we'll receive that. Lucy from Manica Smith was really excited to hear about this bike event because she said that will really help with the TAP grant. Being that ride will go up through Lewis Avenue, and that was part of the thought process of bringing it up Lewis and down Route Road. So, hopefully we get that. Other than that, if nobody has any further questions for me, Mr. Frederick?
I guess I would ask, I just heard
Microphone.
about event. We've heard about that before. Whoops. Yeah. Christmas party, Summerfest, and a few other things. Are these township projects, or are you working in your individual capacity? In other words, are you working as a township official, or are you working as a concerned citizen? And the reason I say that is because if you're doing this as a township official, then you probably should get some approval from here. For example, Bike Week, you say TMACOG's doing that, but yet I keep hearing where you're involved in all the planning. Are you doing that planning as a concerned citizen or as a township official?
That's a good question. I mean, like when I say I'm involved
the only
with
reason
boards-
the only reason I ask is we have some insurance issues here that we want to make sure if you're acting as the township supervisor in your capacity, you probably should get some approval from the board. But further, there are some insurance issues here. Somebody gets clobbered on this bike event, and we just know that someone in Michigan is facing second-degree murder for running pickup truck through a bunch of bicyclists. And then you told me just a minute ago, which I didn't know, the sheriff is going to have his people there. Are we paying for those people, or is this a contribution on their part? I think we need to understand a little bit whether this is a township program, the Christmas party.
It's not a township program.
Yeah, not? Okay, I think it's important that we make sure that this is clarified. Because the last thing we want to have happen is
No, it's a good point, but it's not
in any
a
event, all
township.
I'm saying is, I think we need to understand, and I think it needs to be clear with the people you're negotiating with and you're talking with, either you're doing this as the township official or you're doing this as a concerned citizen. And
Well,
as a
like
concerned
the
citizen, you
Christmas,
can
the
do a
Christmas
lot.
people are, they're gonna, I think they're doing a 501. The Summerfest, that group's got a nonprofit going, that they're
That's all-
formed. I'm just saying,
That's all
you know
well
what I
and
mean?
good. I
They're
just-
all on
yeah.
their own. The Summerfest
Okay.
will have their own insurance for it that they're providing.
Are we going to be named an additional insured because they're using some facility?
The Civic Center's not township property.
Oh, but you're talking about parking on the park.
Well, if I may.
Okay, I'm just asking the questions.
The Summerfest, as that winds through the process, it has to go to the Planning Commission, and I think it already has.
Yes, it's gone.
And it will come next to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And conditions can be put in place by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and where appropriate, we will require that the township be named as additional insured. But that's going through the process. You
Okay,
raise a
good.
very good point.
That's all I'm asking.
And with
That's good.
respect to these other events, the supervisor has been very good about communicating with me.
Okay.
And we're
I'm
endeavoring to keep everything separate. I don't want the township collecting funds and dispersing funds. And so things are being kept separate in that
Okay,
regard.
good.
It's just like for the bike event, the monies that's raised, any check that's
that
raised goes
satisfies my
directly to the
questions.
school, so. No, they're good questions. And that was in talking to Mr. Francis, he had the same concerns, and that's why I'm bringing him up here, to promote the bike thing, but to kind of get you guys up to speed with some of the extra things I'm doing, so. Okay?
Good. I'm satisfied. Whoops, turn it off.